So we're going to have another session right now. We're going to have a conversation between Ken Peterman and General J.T. Thompson. I'd like to bring General Lee Levy, who's helping host this cybersecurity, the Space Innovation Summit that we're having here for 2 days. Lee has been a stalwart supporter and is a brilliant person, very self-effacing. Sometimes his humor can be self-deprecating, but he's clearly brilliant. Anyway, I'd like to bring him up and have him speak a little bit and have him introduce our guests, Ken Peterman of Viasat and J.T. Thompson. So General Levy, are you with us now, sir?
I am. Thanks, David. And I see General Thompson, and I don't see Ken. Are you on, Ken, with us?
We'll bring everybody up. So, General, that was a fascinating discussion, and we have more coming up. This one's going to be amazing. I want to thank General Thompson for being with us again. Thank you for the last time you were with us, and thank you again for being here. But I'm going to turn it over to Major General Lee Levy. Love for you to have a conversation, and we'll just tune in. And thank you both for being here, and we look forward to Ken joining you.
Great. Thanks, David. Well, General Thompson, good morning. How are you, sir?
Hey, Lee, how are you? That looks like you're hanging out in your home office. That's probably just your vacation home at this point, but very nice.
Well, the books are for the pictures. It's me. So the words are interesting, but the pictures are more compelling for a guy with my background. So I get them out occasionally and thumb through them and resist the urge to color inside of them. Before you and I start, I would like to, not everybody knows you as well as I do. So if you would indulge me for a minute, JT, I'd like to just touch a bit on your bio for the folks in the audience who may not understand what a national treasure we have here with us today. Lieutenant General John Thompson.
Touch a bit, not much.
Okay, so the 6-page one you don't want me to do?
Right.
But General Thompson's the commander of the Space and Missile Systems Center at LA Air Force Base in California. And he's responsible for about 6,000 employees nationwide, an annual budget of about $9 billion, and is the Air Force Program Executive Officer for Space. He manages the research, design, development, acquisition, sustainment of satellites and associated command and control systems. He's done just about everything that you can think of. I'm deviating from the script part. He's done just about everything you can think of in our Air Force and Space Force acquisition, sustainment, program management, and program executive officer ecosystem. He brings a rare combination of technical acumen, leadership, breadth, humility, and a longevity and body of service that few in uniform have ever been able to bring to our Air Force and now our Space Force. So I would tell the assembled audience that we're extremely lucky to have him here with us. And is that, before we move on, Ken, is that you I see on the screen with us?
Yeah, hi Lee, how are you?
Hey, great. Good morning. Glad to have you with us. And while we have Ken and we're doing introductions, Ken serves as the Senior Vice President and President of Government Systems at Viasat, and he leads their global defense business, which exceeds about $1 trillion in annual revenues, and does market-leading solutions, assuring high-capacity satellite comms, tactical networking, Link 16 data links for those of you who pay attention to those things, information assurance, cybersecurity, free space optics, et cetera, et cetera. If you know Ken's background, he's sort of like General Thompson, been in this aerospace, space, national security ecosystem for the majority of his adult life. And we're very fortunate to have both of them here with us today. I've got several questions that I'd like to put to each of you, but I think JT, if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe give you a couple minutes to open the session. Ken, I'll then turn to you and we'll go through some Q&A since our time today is brief. JT, over to you, my friend.
Yeah, hey, thanks a lot, Lee, and thanks to the whole America's Future series for setting up this event. It's great to actually see Ken on a video screen. We talk on the phone quite a bit, and consider Ken and Viasat to be very strong partners in our ecosystem. I really enjoyed the last panel. The great discussion. I'll probably reference it a couple of times during the Q&A today, but for the purposes of kicking us off, Dr. Jha, our colleague from UT Austin, I really would like to get one of those Space Watcher t-shirts. I'd like to share it with our US government space domain awareness folks. I think that'd be really cool. Thanks for the invite or the intro there, Lee. We do everything here from our nation's GPS satellites, missile warning satellites, communication satellites for military purposes, to the rocket services that launch them into space. Over the last year, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic has been a real adventure. And while so much has changed during that pandemic era, I just want to say how really inspiring it is for me to be able to watch our men and women in uniform and our industry partners like Ken and his team, who've really worked very closely together to adopt to new business practices and processes in this very difficult time. We've been able to continue to get our mission accomplished in an unparalleled way in terms of delivering space capabilities to the warfighter and the nation. And I think in many respects, we've actually done it in an accelerated fashion during this tough time for our country and the planet. I really look forward to sharing with you some of the great things that we're doing out here at SMC during the Q&A to try and go faster. But before we do that, I'll just reference back to Dr. Goswami in the last panel when she said in her closing remarks, space has changed. And so before we get into this discussion today, let me just take a minute to set the stage. It's really important to talk about space acquisition and new ways of doing business, but really the why behind what we're doing is the threat. For the last few decades, space has been mostly a benign environment. Governments and corporations alike could assume that their systems would go on orbit and be able to operate freely without any threats from adversaries. Thanks to this freedom of operations in space, we've started to use data from the space layer in almost every aspect of our daily lives, from weather to GPS. Former Secretary Barrett of the Air Force used to like to say, before you've had your first cup of coffee in the morning, you've used space. And I think that's very, very true. That situation's changed, though, over the last few years. We found ourselves facing a space domain that's both congested and contested. The Russians have conducted a test of their Noodle anti-satellite missile, which is capable of targeting satellites in low Earth orbit, as well as testing what we believe to be an on-orbit kill vehicle. The Chinese have been aggressively pursuing a number of counter space systems, including jammers, high-power lasers, and offensive capabilities, all of which are a threat to satellites or space capabilities from other governments and from corporations and business entities that are currently on orbit. We think that these developments threaten the peaceful use of the global commons of space. And so what we're doing to accelerate our programs and integrate new technologies and partners, that's going to be a great conversation today between Ken and I. But I just would ask everyone in the audience to kind of keep the why, that threat that I discussed, in their minds as we talk about getting even better at what we currently do. Back to you, Lee, and thanks very much for the opportunity to participate today.
Absolutely. Great opening session, and will certainly help us frame the conversation for the rest of our time together. Ken, I'd like to offer you the same few moments to set the stage from your perch, and then I've got a question I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind. So, Ken.
Sure. Well, thank you, Lee. And General Thompson, it's good to see you again. You're correct. We do talk frequently, and I think that it's prudent to do so because we're in a very dynamic environment, and you're absolutely spot on to talk about the threat. We're dealing with a threat that's at a higher level than we've ever experienced before in space. Clearly, space is a fighting domain, just like land, sea, and air has been for a long time, and I think the Space Force is exactly on target to recognize it as so, and look to deal with it and keep that threat foremost in our mind. That being said, I'll speak to the converse side of that, and that is the opportunity. Because it used to be that when, if you wanted to be a rocket scientist or you wanted to be a space scientist, you needed to go work for NASA or the government, because that was where that center of excellence resided. And in fact, there were only 2 nations in the world that even had such a capability. Today, we heard Mr. Hart, who is the CEO of the company that Z was talking to this morning. He was talking about going to a space conference and having some high school kids talk about how they had conducted some fundraisers. They had a few $1,000s, and they showed him a satellite that they were ready to put into orbit, and they were looking for a ride. Okay, and so it's a remarkable change, and so probably that compounds the threat, because space is accessible to all, and many countries are looking to exploit that opportunity economically as well as perhaps militarily. But at the same time, it presents an enormous opportunity. You have companies like Viasat that are launching constellations at GEO that have more capacity on orbit than all other GEO constellations combined. You have others, companies doing the same thing at LEO, and we're looking at the perhaps thousands of satellites at LEO. So it gives the DoD an opportunity to take a technology dividend that's not been possible before, because they can leverage this commercial space investment and the commercial space technology in ways that were never possible before. And I think that it is visionary for General Thompson and General Raymond and those that in their space vision, space enterprise vision, they spoke to the need to leverage that opportunity, and they referred to it as fighting SATCOM, the blending of military purpose-built and commercial SATCOM to bring our sons and daughters in uniform a blended capability that keeps them on the cutting edge more affordably and more aggressively than ever before. So I think that both sides of those coin deserve some attention, and so I'm appreciative of the way the Space Force has embraced industry leaders like ourselves into this conversation, because we clearly have to look at doing things differently and collaborating more effectively to really take full advantage of the opportunities that we have.
Great, thank you. If you don't mind, Ken, I'd like to start with a question to you, and this really piggybacks off of what JT talked about with respect to the threat. Typically, those of us that wear or have worn the uniform or work in the national security space, we think of threat as, I'll call it platform centric, right? Is our satellite vulnerable? Is our aircraft vulnerable? And how and why and what do we do to manage or mitigate or eliminate those risks? The question for you I want to pose is about threat to the industrial base. Right, which is sort of the foundation that the thing on orbit rides on, if you want to think of it that way. I'd like to get your assessment from your industry point of view about the traditional defense industrial base that you've operated in the past, maybe how you see it now, and what do you see some of those threats are and how they might manifest themselves way before the platform gets on orbit.
Well, I'll speak to, of course, Lee, you're kind of poking at my tenure in this industry. I'm about 40+ years right now, and celebrated my 64th birthday about a month or so ago. And so I spent all of that time in aerospace and defense and then defense industrial base, and seen the invention of incredible technologies, especially in the first 20 years, where we invented as a part collaboratively between the DoD and the defense industrial base, maybe with the power of the taxpayer's purse, to enable our warfighters with capabilities. We invented satellite communications, we invented mobile networking, we invented global positioning systems, and all of those kinds of things in order to help our warfighters navigate, communicate, and be safe when they're at the tactical edge and doing the business and in service of this nation. And what we've seen in the last 20 years of my 40-year or so career is we've seen the private sector embrace those technologies in an enthusiastic way. And what they've done is we've seen mobile networking move, and cell phones have advanced from 2G to 3G to 4G technology, and in fact, what it's demonstrated is the power of agile development techniques, the power of entrepreneurial financing, the power of companies that are competing to bring forward cutting edge technologies to empower our commercial and citizenry with capabilities that we never thought were possible before. And it has exposed perhaps an acquisition system that has a noble history of invention, but perhaps is not so well suited to embrace assessment, adoption, and application rapidly and affordably of these private sector technologies that are coming at us so fast. Okay, and so I think that it challenges all of us to address that, and in many ways it challenges the traditional defense industrial base that has a powerful history of invention and development and that kind of thing. It challenges them because in many ways they're not the technology leader, as we see startups and things really trying new and innovative concepts and technologies, some of which fail, okay, but some of which offer breakthrough capabilities. And so it's a much bigger playing field than it's ever been before. In many ways, it's hard sometimes for those of us that have been in the industry a long time to even stay abreast of where the cutting edge of technology is at this moment in time and where it will be months or a year from now, because things are moving so rapidly. So it challenges all of us.
And I would say that certainly inside of the armed forces, adoption and absorption of these technologies, certainly at scale, becomes a challenge because sometimes small, unique technologies are great at the small and unique level, but when we start to apply them at the Space Force, Air Force, DoD, and beyond level, some of those challenges start to creep in from an absorption perspective. General Thompson, I wanted to sort of piggyback on that, and you heard Ken talk a touch about the acquisition system, and you and I spent many years working inside of it and working to improve it and shape it so that it delivers the best for our warfighters. My observation, and I'd like to see if yours is the same, is that inside of the space acquisition system, it tends to move with more agility than what I'll call the rest of the DoD acquisition system. So clearly there's some special sauce or more special sauce there than perhaps lives in other parts. What do you think that is? How do we build on that? And how can we share that recipe? Because let's face it, the space acquisition system also plays by through and with the rest of the DoD and governmental acquisition system to be effective, whether it's physical infrastructure, heck, just buying vehicles so we can run a launch facility, some of the things that we don't think about typically, but all of that comes to bear. So what do you think some of the space special sauce has been historically, and how can we improve that?
Yeah, Lee, thanks for that. First of all, I do appreciate you starting off the conversation that led Ken directly to talking about how old he was. I will just highlight that I'm not nearly that old, right?
Of course not.
In any case, so before I kind of talk about the space acquisition system, let me also say, there may be people listening in that heard some of Ken's remarks about the tide shifting from the Department of Defense developing capabilities and transitioning that to industry. Things like in the beginning parts of the GPS era, where the government built GPS, we went from 50-pound receivers that needed a car battery to operate, and working with the defense industrial base, we were able to get that down small enough so that operators could use them during the early stages of the first Gulf War and things like that. I absolutely agree with Ken from the perspective of the R&D model has flipped. We used to be the people that were, the Department of Defense used to be driving R&D, and now we find it's the private sector driving that R&D. We have really, I guess in my 30 years in this business have really changed. It's kind of gone from me being able to look at all of the industrial partners who are using GPS signals to make their millions and billions of dollars and being able to say, you're welcome, to something more akin to, you're welcome, but I want to partner with you. And so my perspective on what Ken said isn't that you're wrong and the DoD system is the way to go. My perspective is you're right, and I want to partner with you. So if I were to talk about why I think space acquisition is better than DoD acquisition writ large, I would just say that first of all, we're only 2% of the DoD budget, right? I mean, it depends on how you count it, but it's between 2 and 4% of the DoD budget. So we're a little bit smaller, and we're able to experiment, if you will. And one of the big areas that we've been experimenting in, especially over the last half decade, is increasing our partnerships with industry. Working with partners, non-traditional vendors that we've never worked with before, and even working with some of our international allies. For most of my career, we relied on traditional network of systems developers and suppliers to build and sustain our satellites and our rockets and our other ground control segments. But now, in the modern era, as we transition away from that legacy kind of process, with advances in software, electronics, manufacturing capabilities, size, weight, and power on satellite vehicles that are clearly being driven by the private sector, we've got to enable ourselves to work with a new wave of startups, small businesses, entrepreneurial pursuits, and companies that maybe have an established reputation, but only within commercial circles, not so much DoD. All of these kind of non-traditional partners are bringing new ideas and ways of operating that are really driving a cycle of learning and improvement as we work with them to help mature their technologies and integrate them in really kind of novel ways into the DoD system. That is changing our paradigms for how we use R&D funding, how we use production funding. Are there opportunities to just procure services or data streams that may benefit us in ways militarily that we hadn't envisioned before? So we've got a host of these new industry partners. We actually have a host of new allies as well across the planet who are interested in collaborating on space systems development. With some of our international partners, we're working on some very, very interesting US payloads on allied satellites programs, like our Enhanced Polar System recapitalization with Norway, our QZSS SDA hosted payload with a great ally of Japan. So these partnerships with the non-traditionals, folks that we haven't worked a lot with in the past on space systems, are helping make our space acquisition system better. And those examples are just in my 4 years in this job, are just kind of the first steps that we need to take on a long journey to do more of that. So we're doing that outreach, if you will, to those innovators in our allies and innovators in the commercial area. We've grown that tremendously over the past year, but over the past 4 years. But what we've done so far is necessary, but not sufficient. We need to do more of it. And my guess is that there'll be a lieutenant that works for me right now, sitting in this chair 30 years from now, and they will be the beneficiaries of that pivot away from government R&D to adopting or adapting to allied and commercial R&D.
Yeah, and that lieutenant, she or he will look at us and say, "Holy mackerel, they were dinosaurs."
Yeah.
and why weren't they moving faster?
Yeah, hopefully they'll say, "Boy, he still is a dinosaur," because I plan on being around 30 years from now to watch it.
Well, that may be, but I want to commend you for the leading transformational change at a time like this is difficult. And I think that JT, you and the Space Force are doing a commendable job embracing that. And it is an unprecedented opportunity. I mean, DoD, the military used to be the dominant user of space. And today the DoD is becoming a fractional user of space. It presents an opportunity to roam in and among these commercial networks, as well as and blend that with the military purpose-built assets. And in many cases, it enables there's an affordability opportunity, but there's also an opportunity just to hide in plain sight and leverage this global commercial infrastructure that exists and is being used for so many things commercially and economically. And you're embracing that, and I applaud that.
And what many people may not know is JT has been a vocal advocate for years for flattening the acquisition cycle, the hierarchy, flatten it out, go faster, drive change more quickly. And that's we see the tangible outputs of that inside of our DoD and space acquisition system. Ken, in the limited time that we have left, I'd like to put a kind of a partnership question to you, but maybe from the threat perspective. So JT talked about some of the partnerships that he's seen flourish during his time at SMC. Recently, there's been some press over the Russia-China agreement to do some partnership in space. That poses some unique challenges to us, both commercially and national security wise. How do you see that those kinds of partnerships with other countries, our competitors or competimates or great power competition folks, shaping your business relationships horizontally with other corporate functions and inside of the government?
Well, first of all, I think we're both a commercial company as well as a defense company, so we're very guarded with the technology and the cutting edge technology that we have, and we make a point to make sure that some of our investment supports military unique requirements like resistance to jamming or signal collection or that kind of thing. And so I think that there is a partnership between us and DoD, and that comes first and foremost. And then we have partnerships with other nations in the commercial domain. But I would look at that, Lee, kind of as the maritime domain. We depend on the maritime domain for commerce and economic benefit of all nations as we move goods and services back and forth around the world. And space is also a infrastructure that we conduct economic commerce on. And from that perspective, just like we expect the United States Navy and allied navies to protect commercial shipping, we expect the DoD and allied countries to protect space for peaceful and economic benefit of all concerned. And so I think that that's one area where I think there is an analogy and a precedent from which we can learn.
Right, and you heard similar perspectives expressed in the previous session, which I think was really useful. Gentlemen, we are, I think, near the conclusion of our time. General Thompson, I saw a note earlier in this session that Dr. Jha said there's a T-shirt with your name on it. So just want to make sure that you knew that. And then Ken, I'll give you a moment to say some closing thoughts. Then General Thompson will move to you and then yield back to the moderators.
I'll just speak again to the fact that I think the private sector is working to create interoperability so that private sector users and subscribers can roam in and among GEO satellites, LEO satellites, MEO satellites on different frequency bands using different waveforms, so that as innovative technology comes forward, it can immediately be bolted on and utilized by all concerned. And I think that that holds true for the ability for our military, our sons and daughters in uniform, to be able to do the same thing. So we're looking at interoperability at the network layer that embraces innovation and rapidly applies it so that we can all benefit from that. And I think that's an opportunity for us all.
I agree. Moving away from individual platforms as a capability to a series of capabilities that are almost platform agnostic that give us the adaptability that we need to deliver what our nation expects. General Thompson, final thoughts from you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Lee, and thanks to both you and Ken for the great discussion this morning. As a subset of my remarks at the beginning on the threat, I would like to just talk briefly about how important cybersecurity is to both the commercial and the military space domains, if you will. As Ken just alluded to there in terms of bolting on capability, that's what we frequently find ourselves doing with legacy satellite vehicles and ground control segments, is trying to bolt on cybersecurity at the end of the life cycle. As we transition from government directed R&D to more commercial directed R&D, one of the things that we're going to be desperately looking for from the commercial sector, just like we've adopted DevSecOps software development methodology, just like we've developed a high-end assessment of cybersecurity vulnerabilities in our system, we're going to need private sector help in terms of how to build in, instead of bolting on, cybersecurity to our new systems.
Mhm.
There's so much great work that's going on. There's budding partnerships, like I talked about, with DEF CON and the Hackasat challenge and things like that we did last year. And I won't go into the gory details here. But if all of our participants today could just think about how the commercial sector could not just help itself, but help the Department of Defense with better methodologies for building in cybersecurity from the beginning on our space systems, and then incrementally improving it throughout their lifetimes to face an evolving cyber threat. I think that'd be a really important thing for, from an America's future perspective, for us all to consider with respect to space systems. Thanks very much, Lee, and thanks for to the America Future series for pulling this all together. Over.
That was my pleasure. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us today, but also for your legacy of service to the nation. Very long, distinguished lineage for both of you. And JT, great tease for America's Future Series cyber seminar coming up very soon. I'm sure David will pick up on that, no doubt, because that's what he does. He's the master of those sorts of things. But having said that, I will yield the mic back to the studio and say again, thanks to both of you for being with us today out here.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Ken, thank you so much. I'd just like to amplify some of the things that was just said. The legacy that you guys provide is really important, and we need to remember the sacrifice of all our men and women in uniform. And if we don't do what you guys are working on, if you don't give us an unfair advantage, we are dishonoring their service. We have to do everything that we can for them. We need to keep them out of harm's way. We need to keep our infrastructure safe, et cetera, so that we don't have to send them to go do kinetic warfare. So what you guys are doing is very, very important, and we greatly appreciate it. And you're making a difference for the next generation. So hopefully that we do fight with bits and bytes, and we don't with bullets and bayonets. This is the new way that we compete. And thank you for keeping us at the forefront. I want to thank all three of you.